All right. Hopefully people can hear me. If you can, Pam, can you let me know if you can hear me? Okay, you can. Good. Cool. All right. That's what I needed. Come on, turn for me. Okay, it doesn't want to turn. So we'll just have a tiny it's a little bitty chat. So let's see, is it showing on? They've switched the
broadcasting method on here on YouTube Live. And so that's goofing me all up. I don't want to turn this light off, so I'm just going to be under interrogation light, which makes sure that every gray in my head is showing. So, anyway, welcome. It's been a long time. I just recently did a video kind of explaining what's been going on, where I've been, what's all happening with me over on Paper Doodles. So if you are a member of Paper Doodles, you can go ahead and watch that. I'll keep it up for, that looks terrible. So I'll keep that up probably for about a week, but then remove it, because at this point I just want to move forward. Okay, there's an echo. Does that sound okay? I don't remember which buttons I need on and off. There is an echo, so is that better without the echo? This computer, it sounds fine now. Okay, perfect. Anyway, so to repeat, so you don't have the echo on there. I did a video, a Facebook Live over on my Facebook group, Paper Doodles, for those of you who are members. You can see kind of what's been going on. I don't repeat it all here. What's been going on with me and why I haven't been around, but it is good to be back, and I'm looking forward to moving forward. So what we're going to work on today is some watercolor stuff. During this, I don't even remember when I was doing them. We're all in these weird time warps with this pandemic and everything, so I don't really even remember when I was doing it, but I was posting it on Facebook and on Instagram, and I'm going to be posting a lot more on Instagram in the future, so if you want to follow me on Instagram, that would be awesome. Laura D. Dennison, so at Laura D. Dennison over on Instagram. I would love that, because that's where I try to post. My Instagram is 100%, well, all right, 99% arts and crafting. Facebook, my personal Facebook is just that, my personal Facebook, but I'm pretty careful other than pandemic and wear a mask stuff. I'm relatively careful on the political stuff, and I'm not getting into any of that. Now, my Twitter is 100% personal. I don't do any business. In fact, I don't follow any crafting, any of that over on Twitter. So if you follow me on Twitter and you get upset by anything I put on Twitter, then unfollow me. I get one social media that's just for me, and that's the one I choose. But I still have Facebook, the business page, and I have my Paper Doodles, which is a private group, which is why I posted my video that I posted there, because it's not something that I really want out everywhere. So anyway, that is what we got going on. So we're going to get started. And basically what we're going to do today on this watercolor is I'm going to go through the various materials that you need as well as you may want while we're doing this. One of the biggest things that people have issue with in terms of the kind of watercolor I'm going to be showing you, and I'll talk about some of that, is the drawing part. Well, I'm going to resolve that for you in that I'm going to show you how you can take one of my drawings, which I will have available, and use it as a base and paint from there. So you don't have to be able to draw using these methods. I started doing watercolor back in school. So that was probably, okay, 40 years ago. Now I feel ancient, thank you. But yeah, I think I took some watercolor classes back in 1980, and I've used it on and off. I never became a watercolor artist, but I've done watercolor on and off for 40 years. God, when you put a date on things, it makes you feel really, really old. That was the same thing like when I airbrushed my son's mask, and I hadn't done airbrush in 35 years, and it was just like, where does the time go? But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and switch over cameras, and I'll do a quick check at that time with the sound to make sure things are good. So I'm going to switch over, and we'll see how it goes from there. All right, and then I'll be moving my iPad and my computer here in just a sec. Is sound okay, or do I need to click on something else? Well, I'm going to move this while I'm waiting to see if you guys, the sound is okay. Move that over here. Sound is good. Cool beans. We're golden. All right. This is all new. I totally rearranged my studio, so it's, and I need to put some lotion on my hands, so give me 2 seconds for that. But I totally rearranged my whole studio, so I'm totally down at the other end of the studio. So lighting, I'm still working on getting all that. I'm going to take this off so we're not shining at the moment on my desk. So anyway, all right, watercolor. We haven't used that. I may end up doing an album where we have some watercolor in it. But as always, I like giving people options. So if you don't want to actually do watercolor, you wouldn't have to. But that's in the future. And more on that here in a few minutes. So I think what I want to go over first is actual watercolor paints. Watercolors come in multiple forms. There are what are called cake watercolors. And these are some ones, the Prima ones, or they call them under some other name right now, but they come in these little tiny, oops, it's also camera in a different place. So these are little cake, they're hard, you add water to them to get the color off. That's all I had for quite a while, and this is plenty. It gives you, and you can do pretty much everything just with that, and you just mix. And we'll talk about some of that kind of stuff, and we'll experiment a little bit with some of that kind of stuff too. So this is another good set. This is a Hobby Lobby set. You don't have to get the professional grade Winsor Newton type stuff. You can get the less expensive. This has like 1,000,002 colors in it, and if you wait till they have their 50% off their signature brands at Hobby Lobby, you can get them super cheap. That's what I did on this one. It's got all those colors in it. It also comes with some palette stuff, but these are what are called cake watercolors. I also have some. These are some metallic ones, and these are nifty just because of how you can rearrange them. So these are metallic ones, special. So you can also get specialty type cake watercolors. And these are Fine Tech is the brand. They carry those at Dick Blick. But watercolors also come in tube form. And with these, you typically are going to want, I'm just going to use one of these little palettes. With tube type watercolors, it's kind of like a little bit like toothpaste, maybe a little runnier than toothpaste. But you can put some in, but you can also then just let it dry. And then once it's dry, it's like these. So you don't have to wash this out every time you're using the tube type watercolors. Again, you can buy less expensive when you're first starting out. You don't have to go top of the line, professional grade Winsor Newton European type watercolors. Buy the cheap ones. If you've never watercolored before, you can buy these in inexpensive sets at any of the big box stores, and play with them, whether you're using the cake or the tube. Also, with watercolor, there's other types of watercolor. Gouache is also spelled Gouache, but I pronounce it gouache. Others may pronounce it differently. But this is also a watercolor. It's just an opaque watercolor. Most typical watercolors are transparent. Gouache is similar consistency, comes in a tube. I especially, this one I haven't opened yet, I like to get some white and maybe some black gouache to have it because it's opaque. If you need to do something, especially with like white on top of something, it shows up better. So it doesn't hurt to have a couple of tubes of gouache, but you don't need it. Minimum, you need something like this or a set that's got the tubes. Minimum, that's all you need for watercolor. So you got the gouache. There's also what are called liquid watercolors that look more like an ink. Have a dropper. Again, you can put these into a palette, and they're in liquid form. Not as many colors available, but you mix and match to get, you mix a lot to get your colors. But this is a watercolor ink. I have this in a black. Many times if I want to add some fine details in black, I will use this versus, because it's consistent in terms of its level of blackness, but transparency, versus using the black that's in the cake. It's harder to get a consistent black. So I have black in the ink. Again, this is what you need. These other things are extras in terms of the paints. So the gouache and the tube, and I'm just going to pop those off of here. Other things that can be used as watercolors is Ken Oliver has his color bursts, and these are little, it's a fine powder inside of the tube. You can go watch, he has School Unit 2 videos showing how he uses them. I mainly use it for the powder and add water and turn it into a watercolor when I have used these. He has a ton of videos, which there are a ton of watercolor videos of people who are professional watercolorists. By all means, watch as many of any other people as, you know, in addition to mine, and you learn something from every single one of them. So this is how I do my watercolor. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best and or only way to do watercolor. Other things that you can use is Lindy's Stamp Gang. You can use their sprays. They have the color. It's a great, especially if you're using some of the ones that have the sparkly stuff. Just went out of my brain. That happens a lot lately. But, you know, just take the lid off and you can use them as watercolors. Absolutely. They're also their magicals, which is essentially somewhat similar to Ken Oliver's Color Burst. These are powder pigments, and you can just put them in water and use them as watercolors as well. So it's not always the traditional stuff. You can watercolor with distress inks. Add some ink into a palette and put a couple squirts of water in with it. You can watercolor. So if you don't have any watercolors at all, but you have a couple of brushes, but you do have a full range of distress inks, even the little tiny ones, you can 100% watercolor even with distress inks. So, and then you can just use the oxides, kind of like a gouache, because they're, you know, more solid. So watercolors can be tube, they can be cake, you can use some things that you may already have, they can be ink, they can be, you know, powder form. So there's all sorts of options for the watercolors. One last one, there's Watercolor Pencils as well. Now, one of the things with the method of watercolor that I'm going to show you, you could totally do it by colored pencil or marker or whatever. If you don't want to do watercolor, you can still do the same, use the same drawings in more of a coloring way. So, but excuse me, watercolor pencils are special pencils that are water soluble, so you can color on a light coat of the watercolor pencil, and then using either a water brush or just a regular brush, you can mix them much the way you would with a watercolor. You could also even just scribble these onto an extra piece of watercolor paper, wet it, and use that as your paint stuff. So if you've got limited colors, but you have some watercolor pencils that may have a color that you want, that you don't know how to mix to get to that, then you can use, the pencils. So the watercolor pencils, again, these are the premium ones. There's all sorts of different brands out there. All the big box stores have the watercolor pencils, and they're fun to have as well, especially for some detail work. Again, option. I also like having a palette for my watercolor. Now you can use in these, especially these little sets, they've got some watercolor pans that you can use by all means. But I do like having a separate palette from this. I do some on this and some on this, to be honest. You'll see as we're working. But it is nice to have a palette. They come in multiple sizes and shapes. Many times with these, if I'm doing the tube ones, I put those down in here. With this kind of thing, is great for putting them into so a color that out of a tube. But I don't necessarily then use this palette for mixing on. This is the kind of palette I like to mix on. So I squirt in, if I'm using tube watercolors, I squirt those into these little dishes rather than one of these. But that's just a personal preference. If you have some of those round ones, go for that. This same sort of one, and these are not expensive. They're just a few bucks. Here's a larger one. This is my personal favorite size. This one's about 1 foot by 1 foot when it's opened out. It's a little bit bigger than I personally like. So I like this one. It's about 8 by 8 opened up, or 4 by 8 when it's closed. This it's got this little finger hole here. You can use that. I don't know which way you want to put your hand in there, but it gives you a way to be holding it. So I'd rather have the spot, but and then it's got the spot for your brushes to sit into, I guess. But I'm no Rembrandt, so it's all what you can also, to be perfectly honest, use a paper plate. Not that you need the plastic paper plates, the plastic or foam disposable plates. I shouldn't call them paper plates. The plastic or foam disposable plates can also work great as a palette. So, all right. So, is there any questions about the paint itself? Did you hear 50 bucks? No, few bucks. These things, these guys are not expensive. These Prima ones, they also have other makers, manufacturers have them, but these little Prima ones, if you can get these for like just over 15, 16 bucks with your 40% off coupon. I don't recall exactly how much they are. I want to say they're kind of maybe like 25, and then with a coupon, it makes them even cheaper. So, and I think this one with my coupon, or it was on 50% off, because this is Hobby Lobby's brand, and I think I got it, 12 bucks for all those colors. I mean, it's not great quality. This is not professional grade watercolor, but if you're just starting out, don't have any watercolors, don't invest a ton of money into this stuff that you want. Let's go next over real quick some brushes. If you're going to spend any money on anything, I would say getting a couple of decent brushes is worth it, but I, for the most part, use inexpensive ones. If you can find inexpensive ones that are for watercolor, do so. Some of those sets that have a spectrum of them, to whether they're, I like these kind of round ones. That's me personally. Some people might like some of the flat ones, but we're not going to be doing a lot of washes, and so the flat ones are just, whoops, the flat ones are a little bit not as useful in my opinion. So you can get, and I tend to keep these, and I usually spit on it directly, but I'll just use my fingers. Is after you wash them and stuff, do that so that you can put it back in this tube. I try to keep them as tidy as possible. So these are some of the only brushes that I kind of sort of take care of, because most of the time they look like, you know, that. So, but I like the round ones with a point. And these two are kind of mid-grade brushes. These are Winsor Newton ones. These are not professional grade, but I will spend a little bit more money on, and I just wait till there's a sale. This is a 00, and as you can see, that's a little tiny one for some fine work. So for the smaller ones, I find going for a little bit better quality. Also one that's got really fine, long, this has got about 3/4 inch long bristles on it. I find this is nice for some of the detail type stuff. And if I just spit on that and bring it to a point, and then it won't mess up putting it into the tube. These are cheaper ones. These are inexpensive ones, but if you take care of them and make sure you wash them out afterwards, and just be careful putting them into the tube. Unless you have some place that you can put them in to where they won't get munched on, but because they're just in a cup on my desk, I keep the tube things on. But you don't have to spend a ton again on brushes. And if you have one pretty good size one kind of medium size, and one fine, you're going to be able to do whatever we're doing with just these sizes. Even this set, if you buy, these are inexpensive sets that I think I got at Michael's. You just kind of want a little bit of a range. So I just have then a couple more finer ones, but these are the 90% of the watercolor I do is with this size. As you get more experience, if you decide you like the watercolor, as you get more experience, you may find that you'll want even more variety. But for what we're going to be doing, that's going to be sufficient. So, does anybody have any other questions? Pam says she bought a set at Walmart. Yeah, Walmart has actually pretty good beginner basic watercolor type stuff. Yeah, you can even get one of those little pans like that to just try this out. But these are synthetic. Yeah, I even think these two blue ones are synthetic. I think these are synthetics. I know these are. These might not be, but if you're getting real hair brushes, they're going to be a lot more expensive, and unless you're planning to create masterpieces, you don't really need the expensive brushes. So, okay, the next thing, is there any more questions about brushes? Synthetic has become so, you can get professional quality where you're dropping $40 on a brush that are synthetic hair. Synthetic is not, I mean, 30 years ago, synthetic was like yeeks. But synthetic nowadays, it's close to the same quality. But yeah, you can drop really easily drop $40 on a brush. Oh, but you can. So, all right. Does anybody have any questions about the brushes now? Because next thing then that I want to go over is the paper. Okay, in terms of watercolor paper, basically with watercolor paper, just in terms of this level, basically there's two things that you need to know. There is what is called cold press, and there's what is called hot press. Cold press is much more prevalent. You can find pads of it in every kind of price point, every manufacturer quality, that kind of thing, in the cold press. And then there's also hot press. Now, cold press, when you look at it, and this is hard to explain, but it has kind of like an eggshell-like texture. Or if you're looking at cold press, a rough texture has even more texture to it, but it has a bit of toothiness to the paper, which it's hard to show on camera. But a cold press, and it's the process of creating the paper. Watercolor paper is made predominantly from cotton fibers, rather than wood pulp fibers. Most of them are made from a cotton, because it takes the water much better. So there's cold press with more texture, and then hot press. The manufacturing process makes for a very, very smooth surface. If you're looking to do watercolor that's more of an illustration type of watercolor, to where you potentially adding ink, or that sort of thing on it, you may want to have hot press. Now, hot press feels much more like maybe like a Bristol board or something like that, because it's extremely smooth. However, it's durable because it's still out of the cotton fibers, and it makes it still reacts the same way to the wet media. So, but it's very smooth. In general, finding inexpensive hot press paper is very much of a challenge. Finding the cold press is what you're going to find at the big box stores. Cansen's a good brand. Strathmore's a good brand. Stonehenge is a good brand. Any brands that they're going to carry at any of the big box stores, it's going to be the quality, necessary quality for what we're doing. And again, hot press is a little bit harder to find, but we're not going to be necessarily working with hot press. We will be using cold press paper. So, and again, I don't have personal preferences. I tend to like Canson, but that's I just got into using Canson way back when I was in school. So, but Strathmore works fine. Any other brands work fine. If you have and you don't want to buy watercolor paper, mixed media paper, which is now super popular as well, has a similar tooth to a watercolor paper. It's not typically not as heavy as the watercolor paper in the pads, because watercolor paper also comes in, different weights. The most common weight is 140 pound, and that's what I recommend. You can get heavier weight. You don't need it. The 140 pound weight is typically what's in the pads. You can also get watercolor paper in big, large sheets and cut it up. But you then have to cut it then that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's entirely up to you as to if you want to use the big sheets, if you're doing a larger project, obviously. But back to the mixed media paper. The mixed media paper will also work because it's, I don't know if it's typically got cotton in it or what, but it can take the heat, so to speak, of the wet media. It's designed also for wet media. So mixed media paper will work as well. Now, typically with mixed media paper, it is a lighter weight. So this is only 98 pound versus 140 pound. So this is like light cardstock and heavier cardstock, and I just prefer the heavier. That's me personally. You can also, there's other nowadays specialty. This is a black cold press watercolor paper, and what's fun to do on this stuff, that's why I have these metallic ones. The metallic on the black. This is totally way cool. So you can get, black cold press as well. So my personal favorite brands is like the Canson. I also love the Stonehenge. I know I've seen the Stonehenge at Michael's. But I know Dick Blick has the Stonehenge, and Dick Blick you can order online. I go to Dick Blick frequently. It's up literally, for those of you who remember the CHOP part of Seattle, it's literally a block off of there. And so the only time I avoid it is when we're having social unrest in the area. Other than that, it's like a candy store. I can spend and have spent many hours in there. But they have an extremely extensive website, so if you want to order, you can order online through them. I do highly recommend them. So, any questions about paper? 140-pound cold press is what we will be using on the projects that we're going to be doing. Yes, it is being recorded, so those of you who are having some problems, it sounds like a couple people are having some issues. It is being recorded, and it will be posted on YouTube. It will be posted on my website, and I will link it from Facebook as well. So, but anyway, any questions about the paper? Okay, so couple other things that are not a necessity, sometimes can be really convenient to have. This is called drawing gum, but usually it's called mask, and it's kind of a latex type of product that you can paint on. And what it asks by using, and it usually has you can get it in white, but then it's harder to see where it is. So it usually has either a pale yellow or a pale blue, depending on what brand that you get. This is the cheapest one that I could get. And you can paint this on sections to where if you don't want paint to go in something, you want to keep it white. If you mask it off, it's like putting masking tape on. So this can paint on, and then because it's like latex, once everything is dry, you can kind of use your finger and roll it off and take it off. So this is, having a mask is nice, but not necessarily. So this is one of those extra items that it's nice to have, but you don't have to have it, sort of thing. Then another thing I have too is what's called Watercolor Ground. And what Watercolor Ground is, it's a really, really cool, cool thing. Oh, I wish I had that sample. I don't think I do. But with Watercolor Ground, if you've, for instance, drawn something onto your watercolor paper lightly, and then you've had to erase it, and it may have messed something up, or like you have a boo-boo, this can help to fix the boo-boo. It's kind of like a gesso. Let me dry. It's kind of like a gesso, but with texture to it. And when it dries, and you have to let it dry for 24 hours, but like if you make an error and you want to fix it, and you paint over with this stuff, or like a watercolor, like a cold press watercolor paper, so then you have the texture back, so then you can paint over it. What I did with this stuff is I've painted this onto some acetate. So don't be surprised if you see me using this sometime on a 3D project. But I have painted this onto some acetate. You let it dry, because it needs to dry for about 24 hours. It's the only pain in the butt that it is. But you let it dry, and then you can paint on pretty much anything with watercolor. So, I mean, I could paint my Dr. Pepper bottle with this, and then I'd be able to watercolor paint. Obviously, you can't go through the wash or anything like that, but it allows you to turn a surface into watercolor. And it comes in white, and I have it in black as well. So, white, black, and it comes in a gold, and it comes in an iridescent. So, this is something that's, I mean, they didn't have this kind of thing when I first started doing watercolor, but it's the coolest stuff. Like I said, I turned acetate into where you can put the white on it, and then you can watercolor it. So it looks really cool, but I don't see, as I'm sitting here, where that little sample piece of where I played with that was. So maybe in the next class I'll find that and show it to you. But it's cool stuff. But it's great also for like I said, for fixing boo-boos. If something is just not, it's like, oh God, I just turned that into complete and total mud. You can paint over that small section and then to kind of quote unquote erase it and then repaint. So it's cool stuff. So then last thing that I have on I would almost, well, this isn't a have to, some what's called transfer paper. And this is not the same transfer paper like that you get at that's for like I'll just rip that off. This is not like transfer paper like if you're using Cricut stuff, that kind of transfer paper. This is like, it's what I call graphite paper. So it basically has a light graphite surface. It's like tissue paper with a light graphite on it. And what I use that is for transferring my drawing onto my watercolor paper. Let me just show you where this. So in my watercolor journal, this drawing right here started out from my original drawing. And this is how I like to do watercolor. There's really kind of, this is more of an illustration type watercolor, and then the other kind of watercolor is where you're just painting. It's very organic, and you're painting and then adding detail and that sort of thing. I'm too anal for that. So I plan it out in advance and have a drawing. And this is what I'm going to be showing you, is this more illustrative type of a method. And the reason to having this graphite paper is you then need to transfer your drawing onto the paper that you're going to be painting. And so, and this is where I'm going to help out for those of you who aren't confident with your drawing, is I'm going to have drawings available. I didn't get the ones that I'm going to be doing yet done. That's why we're just going over materials today and not actually starting painting today. Because I'm going to have some drawings that you'll be able to take my drawing. In fact, if people are interested in this one, this is one that I'd be more than happy to have that available. I'm going to just charge a couple of bucks because it takes time. But they're going to be really inexpensive on my website. You can download them. And then you take your drawing and a layer of the transfer paper to put it onto whatever paper you're going to be painting on. I did a poor man version of that, is that I went ahead and did my final drawing on a piece of tissue, and then I just took a soft lead pencil and scribbled all over the back with a soft lead pencil. And then you trace over it on the front, and it transfers very lightly onto your drawing. So, so if I did this on the back of here, I'm just adding some more because I've already drawn over this. So I just scribbled on the back with a pencil, but rather than doing that, which can be really messy, using the transfer paper, and you can just cut that. And if you layer your final drawing over your watercolor paper and trace around things, it transferred it in very soft and light. The biggest thing is when you are getting some of this transfer paper, and I did get this at Dick Blick. I have not seen this at the, you probably can order it online through the major big box stores, but in person they don't have it. Make sure you are getting their graphite, which is the multi-purpose, unless you're using black watercolor paper, which then you would want the white. But they also have it in blue, which is non-photographic for like photo layouts and that sort of thing. They have it in yellow and red. If you're getting it graphite, you can get some white too. This is like, this whole roll is like $7 or something like that. It's not expensive, and it is wax free, so it doesn't cause your watercolors any resist. Your watercolors will go right over it. But with this, let's see, where did I scribble? So with this method, then when I trace over, see how it lightly transfers? But it's a little messier with this method than if I use the transfer paper. This is a little corner of it. With my drawing. And then I trace over. When I'm tracing too, I like to use a different color of pencil so I know where I've traced and where I haven't. But it gives a little bit cleaner line with the graphite paper, transfer paper, than just scribbling. All these little smudgies I have on there, that's from where I scribbled on the back of the page. But you can do that. It's, you know, it's a poor man's transfer paper, or you can get the transfer paper. But if you don't have the transfer paper, it's not a big issue. You just use a soft lead pencil and scribble over the back of your drawing. And then you'll transfer that onto your watercolor paper. So, as I said, if people are interested in this kind of maiden drawing, I'd be more than happy to provide. I can have the borders, because I'm doing borders in this book, so I can provide her and the borders if people are interested in this one. But what I am going to be doing, and I don't have anything to show you with these just yet, is what I am going to be doing for this class is I'm going to do a series. I think it's going to have 3 carousel horses that will be painted. As I said, we're not starting the painting actually today because I don't have the drawings. So the schedule, and then we're going to settle into a schedule. But while I'm kind of gearing back up, you're going to have to bear with me a little bit as I'm trying to get back into the swing and pace of doing some shows again. So what I'm going to have is I'm going to have my drawing transferred onto my watercolor paper. Now, one thing with watercolor paper, to just back up a little bit on terms of the watercolor paper, you can just go straight to the watercolor paper and start watercoloring on it. One thing to be aware, it is paper, and we're going to put water on top of it, and it can buckle and wobble and stuff. So there's also other things that you can do to help prevent that, and I didn't grab the thing, so let me grab it real quick, the board that I used. Oh, this one's, sorry, this is gross. It's got something spilled on it, so let me clean that up real quick. Our paper towels, I'm sitting there looking at those. I don't know what got spilled on here, but oh, who knows? Anyway, but this is a board that actually has a spinner thing on the back. It's just a convenient size, and I like having it to be able to spin. But even if it were without the spinner on the back, it's this easy size to move around. Is you need some painting tape. It's just stretching your paper so that when you're complete, it's still flat. So you need some sort of surface that you can tape your paper down to. Nothing too big. You can even use the thicker, like that 1/2 inch thick, what's called gator board, which is a foam core board, or something that's like a surface on it. That's why I like this one. So You can either use a piece, if you have a way of cutting it, a piece of like the white melamine type shelves and cut a section. But the easiest one is the foam core board, because it's inexpensive and you can cut it down to just a bit larger than their paper. And if you've got a pad of paper and you're going to make most of the stuff that you're going to watercolor that same size, then that works. There's a couple of methods. You can soak this in water. Paintings. That's why I always do recommend. Now it seems to be different when I watercolor in my book. It doesn't seem to work at all. But sheet papers do. So then I can set this down, and it should stick to my board relatively, especially when I spray it on this side. And you want to get it good and soaking wet. Now when you go, you're not going to want to do this right before the sprayer is not working great. You don't want to do this right before you're ready to paint, because it needs to usually sit for about 24 hours. Come on, spray. I don't usually spray this much with these. Okay. Neither one wants to cooperate anytime other than when I don't want it to. And you want to get it good and evenly coated, which is where sometimes when your spray bottles don't want to work, is when it's nice to have it. Okay, so I pretty much have it fully wet down. And so then when it's all wet, it sticks down to your surface. And I do recommend dabbing. I get impatient and brush it, but dabbing is better. And get the excess water. It's still nice and damp, like all the way around. And then you're going to cover over the edge about 1/4 of an inch on all the sides. Now, many times I will draw before I do this. I will draw that line on there, 1/4 of an inch. And this paper is 9 by 12, by the way. The drawings that we'll use are not this large, so don't worry if you're not dead on straight perfect, because it's not gonna. It'll be fine. So you're gonna just tape this down on all 4 sides, and then you're gonna. So basically, what's happening is you're getting it wet, so letting those fibers all relax, and it's kind of bubbling up a little bit. And then as it dries, it'll flatten back out again, and it will be what's called stretched. That way, when you do your watercolor and you leave it stretched while you're painting, flat painting. If you just go straight to the dry watercolor, it'll bubble up at times. And I've in the past your paper in advance. Now, in the book, I had no problems with it warping at all. So you could also get one of these books if you wanted to do things in the books. That's it's totally up to you as to what you want to do. But it really on stretched and a sample up on not stretched, so that you can see the difference. But you can kind of see there's a couple of bubbles right here. As the paper dries, those will flatten out. And then at that point is when I will take my drawing with my transfer paper. Once it's all dry, I will put that onto. I gotta fix this camera; it's up too high for what I'm used to. And then we'll put our drawing onto our paper, and we'll be ready to paint, which is where I'm going to plan to be for our next class, which will be either Wednesday or Friday. And then we'll be so that's where we'll be at the next classes. So if you're wanting to be ready to paint, go ahead and get your paper stretched. Obviously, not necessarily wanting to paint along, but I will have the drawings available a couple days in advance. whether it would be either Monday or Wednesday that I'll have them for the Wednesday or Friday class. And I'll know more by Monday as to whether I'm going to do the class on Wednesday or I'm going to do it on Friday. If I do it on Wednesday, it would be during the day. If I do it on Friday, it'll be Friday evening. So kind of going back to the past. It's been interesting as I've kind of worked myself back into where I'm ready to do all this, and you can see that video to see what's been going on. But it's really been interesting. Is one of the things that got me started into scrapbooking was I was on on Ancestry.com. And I had all these pictures, and that just kind of was kind of helped push me into that direction of doing paper crafting. And the irony is I've been watching the Vikings, which was on History Channel, but we've been watching that past episodes of that in the evenings. And I got back on Ancestry because I remembered something, and we're related to a whole bunch of Vikings through my maternal grandmother, Vikings back to William the Conqueror, and then a whole bunch of Scottish. It's like, no wonder I wrote here. Bunch of Scottish nobility, so Scottish and English, and then so it's been fascinating, going back and looking at all this Viking stuff. But that's what got me started, was doing some genealogy, and now I'm doing genealogy right before I'm getting started doing shows again. So it's rather, and that totally a side note, but it's been rather funny going back in on that, and I feel like I'm heading down that same sort of path as like doing some demonstration of some stuff that I love doing. So, but we're getting there, and we'll be doing some 3D stuff, and I'm just excited to be doing shows again. So anyway, so we talked about the different kinds of watercolor paint itself, whether you're using cake or tube. We talked about the different kinds of the paper, the hot press versus the cold press, and we're going to be using cold press. Let me get this out of the way because the white is really throwing the light off. We talked about brushes, and we talked about ways of masking and fixing. Oh, also, for some detailing, I generally use some permanent black and white for adding some details. For instance, like I have in this one. I have some white details on here and some black details. I did some outlining on here with the black pen. I did some outlining on here. I just like, because that's in terms of how I like to do watercolor, I like the more illustrative type of watercolor. So outlining in the black ink, and I like the Micron Pigma pens. I've been using those for a million years. I'm feeling so old today. And then I like the Uniballs white, but there's all sorts of different kinds of I don't know. I'm finding this versus a jelly roller on a textured paper seems to work. So brushes and pens, watercolor paper, transfer paper, fixing stuff. You need water. I have to keep these little lids on it, otherwise the cats get into them. I just use little mason jars, and you usually need 2 waters, one for washing and one for clean water for your paints themselves. So having 2 things of water, having some paper towels, and baby wipes. I also like to have some protection for my surface so it doesn't get my desk, so it doesn't get wet. The other invaluable thing is a heat tool, or we used to use blow dryers back in the day when I was doing watercolors way back. But now with our heat tools, and that helps speed the process along, because there are times where you need to let it dry before you can add on to it, or otherwise it turns into mud. So having a way to dry it quickly is so much better. So anyway, quickly then, is there any other questions that people have coming up? But again, I'm going to have some carousel horses. At least, well, the first one this week, but I think there's probably going to be 3 because I want to do a horse, a unicorn. No, there's going to be 4. There's going to be a horse, a unicorn, a Pegasus, and a seahorse. But it's going to be more of a horse, but with a mermaid-like tail. So there'll be 4 of them, and they're small, just the 8x10 size. So if you wanted to do one in like this book, there's also a larger. I love these books. These are my absolute favorite. They're not expensive. Hobby Lobby has them, and they have a decal. I love the decal edge, but I love the paper. It's a very cottony paper. It's not as heavy as a watercolor paper, but it feels almost like a handmade cotton paper. That I would have thought these books would be 10 times more than they are. I don't necessarily like the cover on them, so I may cover over the covers, but it's actually a leather cover. But the carousel horses will fit on this larger size. On one side of the paper, they would fit on this size, but you would have to turn them this way. So I don't know if you'd want to do that. But they'll fit on the 9x12, and they'll be a little bit smaller actually than the 9x12 paper. But if you wanted to do it into a journal instead, you absolutely could. But I don't have the stuff to show you just yet because it's still in the computer and I was having printer issues. So but anyway, and again, this is how I am not a professional watercolorist. I am not a professional, same thing. I'm not a professional watercolorist. There are thousands of videos, YouTube videos for watercolor. I just was showing some of the watercolors that I've done. I've been doing it since 1980, as we talked about earlier, but not consistently all the time for 40 years. So there's the way I show you how I do things is how I do things. That doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. It doesn't mean it's the best way to do it. It's just the way that I do it. And as I said, there are thousands of YouTube videos that you can watch from people who are professional watercolorists and how they do things. So this is just in my goodie bag of things that I know how to do and that I'm more than happy to share with all of you that I can see myself using in different ways. I mean, this stuff set my brain I was going nuts for it, got some, and then my brain did one of its hiccups. I'm not going to be creative today. So that has got, I have some very cool ideas for some projects that we will have coming up where we can add watercolor to a 3D project with some of this ground stuff. Anyway, so I can either let you go. I can show you the album for a 3D project. I've shown it before, but we're going to use it. And I can show you the newest paper that I have done that I haven't gotten up yet. I can show you that because the paper we'll be using on that album. But I'm going to use this album for the first. This is not part of the steampunk one. I have another 3D project too that I'm probably going to show. This album will not be used for the steampunk project, which is the next major 3D project we have coming up. But I can show you that if you want, or I can let you go. So Joy would like to see. Now I haven't been looking at the chat other than when I ask a question. So if you've left me a question that I missed, I apologize. So this will be not that this will be an album that'll fit in a 3D project that we have coming up, but it is not the next. I don't know. This may be the next project that we do. But the next big 3D project, whether and I don't know if we're going to do that live or if I'm going to do it on video. But I just basically want to let people know that the last of the steampunk / fairy realm projects is coming up before the end of the year. So, but this is an album that I actually designed, and I've shown this online before. But this is one I designed for when I was going to teach in Calgary. But then, coronavirus decided that wasn't going to happen. But so I have this sample done, so I want to go ahead and I'm working on getting the pattern complete, but since the sample's done, it's crazy to not use it. And this sample, I use the 2 paper collections, Garden Gatherings and Fairy Lights. So let me just real quick blast through this. I've shown this before. It's got some large cards in it. But in this one, this is part of my photo journals. So it has some journaling sections in it. And then, again, it's using 2 different paper collections. There's all sorts of tags and cards in them. So it's got this flap. And then there's another journal here. Lots of tags. Little envelope-y looking little pouch thing that's part of the paper collection. And I'm not going to show these papers off, but these are papers that have been available for some time. And I did, like I said, I've shown this this album when I thought we were going to teach it up in Calgary, but when that plan got waylaid. So, but it's got all sorts of pockets and pouches and tags and all sorts of that kind of stuff. And there will be a written pattern as well as construction of the book itself, tutorials, and then we would embellish it during the live shows. So, but it's a fun one. And then this opens up here and flips open and flip. And again, this is 2 papers that have been out for some time. But part of what helped me get my feet wet again in terms of getting some designing done was doing another collection of papers that we will use for this one. That when I make the one we do in class. And this paper, the newest one, I don't have this paper up yet. It's more of an autumny kind of feel to it. And I don't have this paper up yet. This one is the one I will use that will be in complement. That I already have. This is using the November morning paper. Some of you probably have that. We will be using that one. And we will be using this one, which is called Forgotten Garden. And it's kind of in the muted blues and greens with some pink. It's very much an autumny kind of feel to it. I'm going to be trying to get this paper up tomorrow. But just to give you an idea what the papers themselves look like. I didn't want it to be Halloween, but I wanted it autumn, and it's got some kind of deeper, dull blue tones and moths, and kind of like a forgotten garden. It's got some architectural type of elements in it. Some leaves and kind of just more of the soft kind of colors with some of the flowers. And it looks more intense on camera than it's a little softer and slower. Here's some birds for you, Joy. The colors, like I said, the blues towards the greens with some neutrals and the architectural type of elements, and then the neutral tones encounter with the patterned ones. So bringing in some kind of rich rose and green. the violets, some softer golds, greens, kind of neutral, and then these are all the neutrals. It's got some of the moths on it, some script. Then of course, you know, I have to have some grid and stripes because, you know, that's what I do. And then it's got something that I'm starting to do with more of my paper collections is having some cut apart. These are like the die cuts that aren't die cut. So then you just can cut these out and use them. The different elements. Now I put this on a background, so you could use this as a sheet, but I put it on a background so it's not so stark white when you cut out the floral and leaf elements. I've also have some cut apart words that you can cut out and use. And then then this is something I'm going to be doing a video for, is I've started creating some washi tape. And these will be available also as a separate item, so you can use this. And I'll be using these as washi tape, but I'm going to do a whole video showing how I print these, and they've got the sticky on the back side, and you just cut them into strips. You can also print these onto fabric, so if you want to make fabric tape with them. So that's something new that I'm adding, and I will have some more. I had them up for a while this summer, but I've kind of changed some of them. So since nobody had purchased them, I didn't have a problem taking them down, but I will also have all of the washi tape sheets available as individual sheets. Because that's the other thing that I'm going to be doing with this collection, is I'm going to have it to where if you just want the papers, you can buy the papers. And if you just want the cut aparts, you can buy them as a separate. So it's not having absolutely everything in the collection. If you don't want to do that, you can just get the pieces and parts and then put them all together. So there's also in here all of these. So there'll be like an embellishment set. There will be the washi tape set, and there will be the pattern paper set. So, so here's some more of so here's some of the tags, which are part of the embellishments or ephemera. So those are the 3x4s. These are the journal cards in the 4x6. And then there's the larger cards, mainly because you need these in that one album. So these are 5x7 tags that can be used whether you put photos on them and then there's paper to print these. Now I just have them printed on the white, but there's also to where you can print on the back side so that they're not stark white. And then I have there's 4 journal covers in there and journal papers. So like I talked about with these, you can print them on the back side as well to give it a different, so it's got a neutral surface. And then I printed these all on just regular printer paper, so it has kind of a different look to it. And then I will be showing you how to cut these out so that they have almost like a decal looking edge on them. So there's 4 different journal covers and the papers that go inside. So these journal ones will be also separate. So you can buy the whole collection, and it would be the same price if I had it priced where you had the whole collection, or I have the pieces. So if you just want the pieces or you just want the papers, you can do that. You can do it either way or all. So it'll make much more sense once I have it all up, and I'll explain all that. So it's got, the journal cards, it's got the large cards, it's got the 4 journal pages, and then there's the cut aparts and the washi tape, and then the pattern papers. So there's a lot in this this collection, and this one's called Forgotten Gardens, and it coordinates in a way that color-wise and that it coordinates for doing that album that I just showed you with the November morning, which was from last year. And this one, I will be using the sheets that don't have the fairies on them, because this one also, it had the exact same. With this, all of the pattern papers had it with fairies or without in the same collection. So all the sheets that have the actual fairies on them, I'm not going to be using those. I'm just going to use the ones without the fairies. But as you can see, color-wise, with the 2 collections, they work well together in terms of the palette is not the same, but works together. So I'm going to be using both of these. You could do it with just one collection. You just have to duplicate, have multiples of the papers, whereas this way I don't have to have so much duplication by using 2 collections. So when I do this one, the sample, the one we'll do in class is with November Morning and the Forgotten Garden, which will be up by tomorrow sometime. And this actual sample is done with Garden Gatherings and Fairy Lights. And there will be a tutorial. I just don't have the tutorial done, so I'm breaking my rule already by showing this to you. But I'll have it up when I have it up, and I won't schedule the class until the pattern is written. But since I have this made, I've had it made for close to a year. So I want to use that. So that helps keep things moving forward with our live classes while I'm still working on getting some of the past stuff done. But the next major 3D project that we will do will be the Steampunk Fairy Realm. And there's new papers that go with that one. And I'm planning that one probably sometime in December. So anyway, that's where we are. Okay, I'm not sure who we've got a lovely guest. Thank you, Joy, for taking care of that. So anyway, alrighty, but that's where we are in terms of the watercolor. We will be starting the first of the carousel horses, and as soon as I have those drawn up, I'll post those over on Paper Doodles. And so chances are it'll be Friday. It may be Wednesday, but chances are pretty high that it'll be on Fridays. And we'll just do one a week for a while I'm kind of getting my feet back under me. And we'll go from there. So, does anybody have any other questions? Gail, I'm happy to be back as well. Like I said, I've had a couple of starts and stops here in 2020, but I'm hoping I've kind of got my legs under me again, and we're ready to start moving forward. I just don't want to put too much pressure on anybody because in addition to this, I'm still working on some other stuff as well, and I just don't want to get even further behind. So, but for those of you who just come in, I did put a video up on Paper Doodles kind of explaining where I've been and why I've not been around much. And but from here on out, we're just going to move forward. So, and I don't want to move my computer again, so I'm not, you just get to talk to the hands for right now. But I hope everybody is doing well. Please stay safe. Wear a mask. It's not a political statement. It just helps us take care of each other. So wear a mask and keep your social distancing. We can be like I watch all these Zoom shows on, these Zoom news things now on TV, and they have issues too. So I don't feel so bad. After 11 years of doing this, I don't feel quite as bad when the professionals have the same sort of issues that I do sometimes. So, but it is what it is all I can say in terms of my my lack of super professional streaming. I look at some others and I go, holy cow, where they've got these, on their videos and stuff, they've got these big opening credits and stuff. And I'm like going, on the videos, I'm a one-shot wonder. I don't know how to edit. So if I don't get it done in the in the video, I got to do it all over again. My kids keep volunteering to offer to help me do the editing and stuff. But, this is the way I've done it. I've been doing this since 2009. It's the way I've done it. It works. It's not the most professional in terms of some of that stuff, but, I'm pretty I try to be. I'm pretty transparent, I think. Sometimes too transparent. But I'm just glad to be back. It feels good in a way that the fits and starts previous to this and this year haven't felt as good. I think I'm just getting my mind finally um, to just move forward. So I'm excited. I've got a list of a dozen projects. So I don't plan to be gone anytime soon. You know, if I need to take a break, I will. But I from here on forward, I plan to just keep moving forward. Whether I continue to do, if I go back to doing kits or not, that's the biggest question mark I have, because I don't know if I want to do kits. So we'll see. But I have a dozen projects in my head, plus some of the projects that I'm still needing to complete, you know, before that. So, you know, I'm going to be around. And I know a lot of you like the live classes, but there will be some of them, especially with the past due stuff, that will go straight to video. But I'm slowly and surely working my way through, and we're going to get there. And your patience, as always, is it's the best. It's amazing. The patience gets it done faster than the demand. Let's just put it that way. So, alrighty, my website is up. My website has never gone down. My website is lauradennisondesigns.com. And all of my patterns, all of my digital papers, all of that is all still there and available. And all of my past videos as well. Under the archive tabs, I saw Gail was asking about that. Yeah, everything's there. It's been up. It's been running. It's been very. Carol does an amazing job for me, and we just keep things going. The videos, as I said, are all, or most of them are all still there. I still have a few that were done, that were in the calendar, and then the calendar, we had to switch to a different calendar, and I haven't gotten those into the archive list, but I need to. I need to get that list from Carol and finish getting those all up. But everything is still available on the website. So if you haven't been around since before 2017, you don't need an account to see everything on the website. But if you have some past orders that you want to see from prior to 2017, you do need to make contact with me so that we can get you reset up again. Because I am finding I'm having people from way back showing up, but they can't get into the website because it's a totally different website since 2017. So, but I can get you into it. So if you need to, just let me know. But I've missed all of you, and I've missed that contact with all of you. And I know for a lot of people, a lot more people are doing the online stuff. Some doing our Facebook. The Facebook, it doesn't work as well for me as YouTube Live does, so we're going to stick with the YouTube Live. But I know there's a lot more people doing that you typically would do live in-person classes. But this is what, I've always done, and we'll just keep doing it. So anyway, thank you as always to Joy and to Lois both for helping me out. Also to Pam, who's also helped out a bit here and there as well, and I appreciate that. Karen, you can just you can email me at lauradennisondesigns.com if you need to get access to some past stuff. As long as it's between 2014, March of 2014, and current, I can get you access again. Anything prior to 2014, I have to. It's some significant digging through PayPal in order to find out, because that was when I was on a completely different website. So 2012 to 2014, there's like a 2-year period. I don't have access to those orders any longer, except going through the PayPal history, which takes me a lot of time to find those. And anything prior to 2012 was on Etsy, and I can get to those. So there's just that window, that 2012 to 2014, that I don't necessarily have quick access to. If you have receipts for it, by all means, send those to me, because that makes it a whole lot easier. But anything from 2014 forward, you may not have access to it, but I do, and it's easy to attach. If you can't get into an account and you need to access those, I can get you set up with an account and attach those to. If all you're wanting to do is go in and purchase something, you can set up a new account in the checkout process. And then if you have some past orders, I can attach to that. But in the transferring, everything transferred over. They just wasn't hooked to each other. So, and there were like 12,000 individual order things from over all those years that had to get attached. And so it's been, and each one of them takes about a minute. So it's been a long process. So the people who early on were active, and those people who have requested it, I've done it, but it's just, I haven't had an opportunity. It's not been the highest priority for people who haven't been around in years and years and years to make sure that theirs are attached. So if you're just coming back into the picture, I'm more than happy to do it for you, though. Alrighty, so if there's any questions, always feel free to email me. I just ask. I try to be professional, and I try to be kind. Whether I'm sending an email to somebody or receiving one, I just ask that you do the same. I get that you may be angry, you may be frustrated. And this doesn't just apply to me, but to anybody right now. We're all in this boat, and it's a really scary boat with this virus. But the one thing I do request is that everybody take a breath and be a little kinder to everyone around you. I think that's what we all need right now, more than anything, is just to treat each other with kindness. And I swear and promise I will give you back the same. So, anyway, if there's any other questions, feel free to email me. The video will be available on YouTube. It will be available on my website, and I'll link it over on Facebook as well. And again, if you want to see what's been going on with me, that's just over on Paper Doodles. So, anyway, any other questions? And I apologize, I haven't really been looking at the chat. The chat's kind of tiny. Anyway. Alrighty, guys, I'm going to let y'all go so that I can go get some dinner going for everybody. And that's where we are. Again, thank you to Joy. And I know Lois was here earlier. She probably ended up having to leave because I know it's getting late for her. But thank you, Joy. Kind of last minute, out of the blue, you, as always, come through for me, and I appreciate that. So, alrighty, guys, I'll let you go. Everybody have an amazing, amazing rest of your weekend, and have an incredible week next week. And I'll keep you posted as to whether we'll do the class Wednesday or Friday, but you can probably count more on Friday. So, wear a mask, keep your distance, wash your hands, and show a little love to one another. And we'll see you next time. Thanks a bunch. And now I gotta remember how to log out.